Thank you for joining us. My name is Brittany Allen. I am the author, events logistics coordinator here at the United Pratt Free Library. And just a few housekeeping notes. Tonight we have Greedy Reads. They are a partner for tonight, so if you want to purchase a book now or after the program, they will facilitate that. This will be a 45-minute moderated conversation with a 15-minute Q&A and a book signing at the very end. Now on to the event. This evening, I'm happy to welcome Ashante Reese to the Pratt Library to discuss her book, Gather, Black Food, Nourishment, and the Art of Togetherness. Food justice is defined as the understanding that our food system is unequal and that something needs to be done about it. But how can we create a world where everyone has enough? What does it mean to truly nourish ourselves and communities? In Gather, anthropologist Ashante Reese argues for a vibrant new vision of food justice that places Black communities at the center and offers us a visionary, delicious path forward. Reese reveals that to truly create equity in our food systems, we must embrace the abundance that already exists around us and recognize that the social body is as important as our individual health. Gather presents rich, on-the-ground stories of gathering around food in 4 spaces: gardens, family, reunions, repasts, and protests. Blending rich storytelling with analysis, these chapters argue for the political power of food and invite us to learn from the tactics Black communities have long used to create sustainable systemic change. Ashante Reese is a writer, anthropologist, and associate professor of African and African Diaspora Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Raised in Cooper Settlement, Texas, she lives in Austin and is involved in the food justice movements nationwide. This evening, Ashante Reese will be joined in conversation by Johns Hopkins University history professor Jessica Marie Johnson. Jessica Marie Johnson is a historian, writer, and associate professor in the Department of History at the Johns Hopkins University, an ecosystem rich director at LifeX Code, Digital Humanities Against Enclosure. She is the author of the multi-award-winning book, Wicked Flesh, Black Women, Intimacy, and Freedom in the Atlantic World, co-editor of the Conceptual Humanities, and runs the Kitchen Table History newsletter, kitchentablehstory.blog. Her work explores histories of slavery, African diaspora, Black life in the Americas, as well as Black data and the Black digital humanities. In Publishers Weekly Star Review, they wrote, in this phenomenal meditation on food's role in Black history and culture, anthropologist Ashante Reese shares guiding principles gleaned from Black social gatherings that can help combat hunger and food insecurity. It's a delicacy for the heart, mind, and soul. And National Book Award-winning author Taya Miles relayed, with an anthropologist's keen eye for vivid detail and a knack for noticing ancestral ritual in everyday practices, Ashante Reese expertly reveals the deep meaning of nourishment, togetherness, and celebration and suffering. It is my great pleasure to welcome Ashante Reese and Jessica Marie Johnson.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Hi.
Hello, friend.
Hello, friend. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for coming, letting me have the honor of chatting with you about this amazing book. Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you for saying yes.
Anytime. So why don't we start with the obvious question. What's this book? What's it about? Tell us a little bit about it. Get us all on the same page.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I am also very sleepy. So your energy gives me energy if you can, okay? Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes.
So Gather started with a very simple question, which was, what can we learn from how Black people gather around food? That was the question. Um, Obviously, I think, a Black person. I have been in Black communities my entire life. I research food in Black communities, and what I know is that even with all of the really fantastic food justice work, many organizations still approach Black communities from a place of deficit. And so the other premise I had was, I think I'd written it on a poster, it shows up in the book too, there is nothing inherently wrong with Black people. So that was the other thing that I wanted to hold close along with that question. And so Gather is a product of that. I also have worked in and with different food movements for a long time, which I love and I admire a lot of organizations. But most of us are not connected to organizations. And many people are not involved in movement work, but they're still doing good things on a daily basis in their communities, in their families, in their cities. And so I chose the particular kinds of gatherings, if you will, because they're just kind of everyday things that Black folks are engaging on a regular basis. Gardening, repast. How many people have been to a repast? Mm-hmm. Right? Family reunions. How many people have been to family reunions? So in writing this book, y'all, I learned that there are a lot of people who have never been to a family reunion, and I was aghast at this. But family reunions, and then the latter piece that I thought would bring it all together was mutual aid, which is, in some ways, mutual aid is aspirational. It's a way for us to think about being with other people, providing for other people without it being just transactional or bureaucratic. And so I wanted to end with something that felt like, what does it look like to give and not necessarily know what's going to be coming back to you as a result of that giving and being able to support other people?
So I love this. I love that this is rooted in giving, of course, and I love that it's called Gather, just one hot word, right, of bringing us all together. I also love that it's related to some of the food justice and the anthropological food work that you're doing. This is anthropological too, but it's different. And I think you were trying to do something a little bit different from the first book. Could you say a little bit about how this shifted and what you shifted here?
Yes. So I'm an anthropologist on most days. And in my first book, I was doing research in Washington, D.C., and again, still interested. I think that's probably where the origins of this thing of like wanting to see Black folks as agents in our community, wanting to think about our relationship to structures. And so the first book really develops this theory around how Black folks in Deanwood, Northeast DC, navigated a racist food system in the city. And by navigated, I literally meant like, how are you moving around the city to get food in a city that has very deep food inequities, not unsimilar to Baltimore? So I wanted to understand that, navigate, like I love to have a one-word thing that I use. So for Black food geographies, it was navigate. And I wanted to think about what navigate meant. So physically, emotionally, but also with things like memory. I worked with a lot of elders in DC, and they had lots of memories of what the neighborhood used to be like. And then I had a lot of younger folks who had critiques and ideas of what the neighborhood should be. And there were, they were not too dissimilar, actually. Some of the things that the elders remembered about abundance, that is what younger folks were looking for, but they weren't necessarily connecting and talking about those things. And so that first book was really an effort to put on paper what I thought activists were already doing, which was talking about racism in the food system, but we hadn't had that many books that really kind of laid it out or fleshed it out in particular ways. So that was that book. And then I think Gather is a little bit different because, or it's a lot different. Still anthropological. I still got to be nosy and go hang out with people. Still interviewed people. But it's different in the sense that as an anthropologist, we do immerse ourselves in communities, and there's still like a disconnect a little bit. We still keep a little bit of distance. And with Gather, I really wanted to do what Christina Sharp asks us to do in her 2016 book, In the Wake, which was write into a we. She actually says to write into a we that is both Black and global. And I thought quite a lot about what does it mean to be a we, and how does that need to shift how I write. And so in Gather, you get lots of little autoethnographic or memoir adjacent pieces about my own life as a way to kind of tap into larger conversations about the traditions and the rituals that I'm writing about. So there's academics, I don't know, Jessica, you might. Okay, so Jessica and I are in a writing group together, so what I'm about to say I already know is true. We don't do feelings a lot, like
We're
our
scared
own.
of our feelings.
We don't do a lot of feeling in terms of like, there are lots of feelings that come with research, but like the level of vulnerability that it can come across sometimes when we are like emoting ourselves. But there's a lot of that, I think, in Gather, and I hope it shows up in a way that doesn't overshadow the other people who are in Gather, because that's never my goal. But for me to be a part of the we as well, like as someone who has experienced all the traditions that I'm writing about, but also as someone who has experienced the kind of loss that I write about, or the kind of fear that I write about, and also joy, right? So I tried to be a part of the we in a different way for this book.
I want to come to the we in a second, but I want to thread the needle a little bit about how this book and the last book sort of, make a particular point about food justice and make a particular point about the politics of organizing and what we need and how we build capacity amongst ourselves. Like, I feel like I'm cheating because I know that we have been in writing community. But that question of gathering and how the work of gathering is so important in food justice seems really, really, really crucial, and is an argument that you're making about, well, what argument might you be making before I put words in you?
She also obviously has read the book, but she also read, she's read drafts because, again, writing group. But
I mean, you're making a claim, though.
There is a claim. There is a claim here. And I think part of what again, I'm one person who's been doing this work for a while. Other people might have other opinions. But I actually think food movements are at a real impasse at this point. We have gotten so steeped in defining food justice as, if you ask most people, some version of food justice is access to affordable, healthy food, which I think is really, really important. Where it gets sticky is defining what we mean by healthy, whose version of healthy, who gets to define that, what happens if that's not someone else's version of healthy, do we still believe that they should have access, and on and on and on and on and on. So that becomes tough, right, when organizations in particular are literally setting the table for people without their input. And so when I write about the we, it is a very direct sort of way of addressing the us versus them, which I think is an unintentional byproduct that comes out of some food movement work. Not all. There are some really great examples, and I can point you towards some even here in the city if you would like. But I think by and large, there are these unspoken expectations of what a good consumer looks like, and that operates in a lot of our food movements, I think, right? Even when I'm amongst friends. So one of the examples that I use with my students to try to help break it down for them is, because of what I study, I think people have a real assumption of what my food consumption can look like. They might have some correct assumptions on some points. But I would tell my students that when I used to work at Spelman College, I lived in a neighborhood that was affected by food apartheid. I'd be driving from Spelman, heading home, there's like a grocery store and there's a Popeyes. And you know where I would stop on my long days after teaching? I was going to go get a 2-piece and a biscuit from Popeyes, right? And those kinds of things coming from me, we chuckle about them. But if the same person in someone in my same neighborhood who was low income or perceived to be not know what healthy eating looked like said that, they would be judged, right? So I think there's also this way when we say the we, it is the Pollyannish way that we say we, but it is also talking about these things that are, they're not as binary as we would like to frame them as. I have habits that some people would call unhealthy. I have habits that people would call healthy. But sometimes we don't stop to get to know what those things are for people before we already start telling them this is what you should be doing or this is what you should be eating.
And the role and the ways of thinking about, like, we are worthy, we're inherently worthy. And you have a couple lines in here that I think are really potent, and a potent reminder of what gathering does for us. And there is certainly a figure, I think, I'll speak for the Black community, Black families, I'll definitely speak for my own, that always treated me like I was worthy and definitely did, I told Ashante, I was like, I was crying in your book, let's read it. But definitely treated me like I was worthy and did it also through food ways and through gathering, was my grandmother. And I think this is something that I'm guessing that many of us share, that role of food and grandmothering. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, I know, your grandmother and how you talk about her in this book and what role she plays for you.
So, how many people have a grandma food story? Like fed by your grandma, loved by your grandma through food? Okay, almost everybody in the room, right? Or someone who is a grandmother kind of figure. So, we're not dissimilar in that way. I grew up next door to my grandmother. She did a lot of caretaking for us, she did a lot of feeding for us. And in Gather, what I wanted to do, I don't call her an organizer, but she kind of was the first organizer that I knew. She was a devout Christian, committed to her church, always present when something was happening, whether it was celebration or mourning, always able to not only just gather us, but gather a community when people had a need. And so I think as an academic, I read a lot of really beautiful things, a lot of things that make me think. But when I started writing Gather, it was a no-brainer to me that she was where I was gonna start. She also taught me a lot about failure. My grandmother gardened her entire life, my entire life. She was not really that good at it. And she did it anyway. And I learned a lot from watching her not be good at it, actually. She was good at a number of other things, that just was not one of them. And so I think, like, for me, she represents what I mean by most people aren't a part of food movements, but they're doing some really meaningful work in their families and in their communities on a regular basis. She was doing really meaningful work. She was always, my grandmother was a domestic. She worked in other people's homes. And I don't know. I think it's a wonder that you can, for people who work in other people's homes and then come labor in their own. I mean, the amount of energy and strength that I think that must take is something that I personally just don't even know what that would mean, right? I barely am able to take care of myself sometimes. So my grandmother is a central figure. She shows up throughout the book, but she's also a reminder, I think, for all of us that we don't actually have to go outside of our communities to find the theories that we're looking for how we want to change the world. Right? Most of us already have some of those models in our families or in our neighborhoods.
Yeah. And there are a lot of Black women who are in leadership positions, who are thrust into leadership positions, who take up roles of sustenance, of care, of caring. One that comes to mind that you talk about a lot, I think is really important here for us in Baltimore, is Mama Maxine. and the work that Heber Brown has been doing here, and the food security network, the Black Church Food Security Network that also is happening here. Could you talk a little bit about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's familiar with Heber Brown and his work here? Man, okay, I'm gonna have to tell him he's got some fans in the room. Excuse me. He was obviously supposed to be here tonight and had a family emergency, so isn't here. But people know Heber Brown. They know the work that he's done with Mount Pleasant. They know the Black Church Food Security Network. What's most interesting to me about, one of the most interesting things to me about Heber Brown's story is when he started gardening at Mount Pleasant, he was mentored by an elder in the community named Mama Maxine, who passed away in 2016. And Mama Maxine taught him how to garden. She taught him about interplanting, but she also taught him, now Heber says that when he started thinking about, oh, we want to garden, we want to farm, he was thinking, I have to go buy or rent a plot of land that's bigger. And Mama Maxine told him, that's nonsense. Why would we go do that? We have land right here. And that's how they started the garden on the church property. And so she learned, one of the things that he talks about is he learned how to do a lot with a little from Mama Maxine. But Mama Maxine, I call her a hype woman in a church hat.
Yes.
She was so protective of Heber Brown. Heber started pastoring that church when he was 28. And anyone who's connected to or been a part of Black churches, A, know that 28 is pretty young, and B, know that if you're that young coming into a church, people are going to be looking at you like, thank you, yes. See, these are my church-going folks right here. And that's exactly what they did. And Mama Maxine, after one really tense meeting, Heber recalls feeling like, okay, I'm probably going to get fired, essentially. Mama Maxine stands up in a meeting and says, essentially, this is the person we chose, this is our leader, this is our pastor, y'all need to leave him alone, and the meeting was done.
That's right.
And so when we think about Black women who are doing this kind of nurturing, we have these images of like the big mamas who are cooking and putting meals on the table. But then there are the Mama Maxines who are the protectors, who are the teachers, who are hyping up people who to go out and do even more good work, right? All of that is a form of nurturance. It's a form of nourishment. And that's part of the book for me, which is to think nourishment happens before you even have food on your plate. And it's happening all the time. That kind of work that Mama Maxine was doing, I've not heard Heber talk without him mentioning her on some level. That is how impactful she was to his development. And now the Black Church Food Security Network is 250 churches. It's 250 churches. And this is all started because Heber wanted to plant some things. And then 2015, when Freddie Gray was murdered, many of you were here, I'm assuming. Children weren't going to school. 84% of students in Baltimore public schools receive free or reduced lunch. So you're not going to school. A lot of kids were missing meals. Grocery stores were being boarded up. And what were people doing? You called the church. And they were getting calls after calls. And so what did Heber do? He called other churches from further outside of Baltimore and said, we need all these things. And they set up their church as a distribution center to make sure people had food. And that's how the Black Church Food Security Network formed. He had this garden. People knew the church had a garden. That was part of the reason why they were calling, can we get fresh produce? They ran out of those things. He called up people that he knew, and he said, if this is what we can do in an emergency, what can we do just if we're proactive? And now it's 250 churches, so much so that he left pastoring just to be the executive director of the Black Church Food Security Network. I just think that's amazing.
Yes.
I just think it's amazing. And I think, one thing that most of us maybe know what I'm going to say may sound intuitive once I say it, but we don't think about it. But Black churches are some of the most stable landholders in Black communities. And so organizing these stable landholders to do something other than just be a ground where people come in on Wednesdays or Sundays or funerals and holidays, but as a congregating space where people are growing and having farmers markets and all these things, I don't know, y'all. I just think it's so amazing. It's so amazing. And so I knew that I was going to write about Hubert Brown because people have an idea of what gardens look like and what they mean. And I think what he does with his work is expand our understanding about gardens, right? And he really embodies, he says that John the Baptist is one of his favorites. And so then I had to go back. You know, I'm a little bit of a heathen, so I had to go back and read more. But what I realized, what I learned, I was like, this is so appropriate because one of the things that John the Baptist does is he goes out. And they're like, you know, y'all are cool over here, how you congregate, but we actually need to go out to people. We need to go out and find the people who, instead of mocking them for being unclothed, clothe them. Yeah, that's right. Instead of saying, maybe you should be eating, feed them, right? And I thought, what a perfect role model that he has chosen for himself. I mean, basically, Heber is a Black Baltimore John the Baptist, right?
Shifting from the Black Church Food Security Network a little bit, you also talk about another kind of gathering, a fixture in Black community, I think maybe especially in Black Southern community, but kind of across the board, the family reunion. And I remember when you sent out a call on Twitter.
R.I.P. Twitter.
R.I.P. For folks to, you know, invite you to the family reunion and have you, you know, check out what's going on and learn a little bit, say a little bit about what that's like too. Just be like, hey, come in, you know, I'm a stranger, I'm in here, let's go.
Now that's where I got to flex my anthropology muscles. So I put out a call on Twitter. I got about 40 invitations to people's family reunions. Which was amazing. And I was like, I can't go to 40 family reunions. But I went to 8. And I interviewed people from the others that I couldn't attend. I asked them to submit photos and videos of them. You can see a lot of this actually on blackgathering.net. For the people who gave me permission to share, I uploaded photos, videos, transcripts of interviews and such so that you can kind of join us along on the journey. So I went to these family reunions. First of all, it's kind of, I can't believe 40 strangers invited me to their family reunions, mostly strangers. So that was already a thing, and then I went. So there, I don't know what that says about me.
And it wasn't DMs, like it was in real time. Like, oh,
in
yeah,
real time, people would comment on the post. My family reunion's in this place, this time. It was amazing. So what it was like, it was amazing. In that chapter, I talk about this concept of radical hospitality. Because I was invited to family reunions by whoever responded to me on Twitter. They may or may not have told people I was coming. So I show up in my family reunion t-shirt. And sometimes people would ask me, okay, what is anthropology? There's one example where an elder at one of the reunions I went to, I sat next to him, he's asking about anthropology, and he argued me down that anthropology was about digging in the dirt. And I was like, okay, forget that PhD I have. But again, that's also a moment I like to mention because that kind of banter is a part of the family reunion experience. And I was included in that banter. I fed people. I fixed plates like everyone else. I changed babies' diapers.
And thank you. I have 2 small babies. Thank you.
A lot of what I write about is the freedom that young people, children in particular, feel in those spaces. The unwritten rule that your children are safe to run around this park or wherever is not a small thing given Black people's history with public spaces and surveillance and being policed in public spaces. So to see kids just kind of roaming freely was beautiful and important. But I think even more than that, once I got past my name, I'm an anthropologist, okay, what are you looking for? I don't know, I'm just here hanging. Then people are like, okay, you belong here. And it reminds me of the scene in Poetic Justice. How many people have seen Poetic Justice? Yes, yes. You know, they're in the mail truck. Lucky is like, what's that smell? They're like, smells like barbecue. They see the Johnson family reunion sign. They bust that Yui, right? They go to the Johnson family reunion, and no one even assumes that they should not be there. What if that was the general ethos of our society? You just, like, I mean, it just gave me chills. The assumption that everyone who is there is supposed to be there. That was one of the biggest takeaways from the family reunions. And last thing I'll say is, you'll see if you go to the website, I put some of the big group pictures from the family reunions. I'm in all of them with my family reunion t-shirt. And it is, I'm never gonna get over this. I know that 5 years from now, people are gonna look at these pictures and be like, whose girlfriend was this? And that is going to, I feel like, I will die a happy person knowing that people are gonna be like, we have no idea who this person is. But again, like, no one batted an eye about me being there. Elders told me stories about their childhoods, about what reunions meant for them. And in that time, I started going in 2022. This was right on the heels of COVID. So most families hadn't gathered, and all of the families had lost people to COVID. So it just really changed the meaning of being together in that context. And one of the families that I don't write about a lot in the book, but you can see some images from their family reunion. Their family had had a split at the time 27 years prior, and they had not gathered since. So it was the first family reunion in 27 years, and 350 people showed up. It was just, I mean, see, my job is cool. Like, I got to be like a witness to the first gathering first large family gathering in 27 years, and it was just amazing.
One of the things that, your job is cool, but it's also a blessing because some of those reunions, the interviews you did, the documentation you made, I'm a historian, I'm very interested in archives and in our family archives. For folks who then pass, some of the elders who pass, that was some of the material that their family had, Yeah.
So one of the families I read about, the Cockrell family, two of the elders that I interviewed and sat with at the reunion have passed away. A book is dedicated to them. And so after learning about them passing away, I made a little montage of all the photos and videos and audio that I had of them and gifted to the family, which was meaningful to me. I hope it was meaningful to them. But the other thing I'll say in terms of archives, because I'm not a historian, but I truly believe that people should be the stewards of their own archives, at least thinking about how you're keeping your material, whether you donate it to somewhere else or not. So everyone who sat with me for an interview, who sent me anything, or whose family reunion I went to, I transcribed the interviews, and I gave the audio, the video, and the transcripts back to the families and individuals as a way of contributing to their own archives. Because sometimes we think the things that we have to say or the traditions that we have are just common sense, and so we don't write them down, or we, whatever. So here comes this researcher who has it. Why wouldn't I give it back to you, right? Why wouldn't I give back your own words, your own experience back to you? And that is not a typical practice for an anthropologist, but it felt really important to me. And it's something that I learned honestly from my first big research in DC. 2 people passed away while I was doing that research, but I had basically done an IRB, Institutional Review Board, that said I would not share these things back, and I didn't feel good about that. And so I made a sort of commitment to myself that I would do things differently next time, and so I did. Yeah.
That's amazing. That cycle of, of grief and also of love and care is such an important part of how you're thinking about gathering and how you write about gathering. And now it kind of circles back again to you and how you bring yourself into the conversations of gathering and the ways you're describing these gatherings in the book. You have the meditations on repass, and you start with yourself and then move through and scale up, actually, which is another theme that's in there. But could you talk a little bit about what that meant for you to think about where you were placed in the scale of things, and also why a repass, what a repass, what role does that play?
Okay, repast, R-E-P-A-S-T. For most Black people, repass, R-E-P-A-S-S. I grew up in rural East Texas, population 7,400. When I was growing up, it's about 6,900 now. My cousins were my first friends. I don't even know that I knew friend and cousin were 2 different things growing up initially, but my cousins were my first friends. So a few years ago, 2021, my cousin who I grew up alongside passed away unexpectedly. And so I opened a repass chapter talking about learning about her death, but also the experience of repass after. And, the honest way of me answering this question of why I open up that way is because I don't think she was honored in her life in the way that she should have been. And so I wanted to honor her in the writing. And there are things that we do, sometimes unintentionally, where people don't die the honorable death that you think they should have, then you just don't honor them. And I experienced that in how we talked or didn't talk about her death. And so I wrote her into the book because she'll live forever in the book, in the way that I talked about her. In particularly the ways that I talk about her life and not necessarily the circumstances around her death. But the thing about the repass for me was that I was encountering people that I hadn't seen in a long time. And it was awkward for me until it wasn't, because in that space, basically, it felt like me being a prodigal daughter returning home and people sort of welcoming me back in ways that maybe I imagined that they wouldn't, which is a whole other book, perhaps.
Yes. We want it.
But it was really special to be back in that space in that way. And it's this reminder that, okay, the church service is what it is. And then, I don't know about y'all, again, I'm Southern, but there's always more than one repass. There's the church repass, and then there's what's gonna happen at home. Yes. Thank you. So our home repass is where all the good food is. Oh, tip too, if you've never been to a repass, it is not the time to try a new recipe. And if you're going to like a Black repass, if you are not known for the dish that you brought, it is 100% going somewhere else. And so, that's funny. Like, and those kinds of conversations are happening. Like, I'm talking to my auntie about like what to do with this, what to do with this. She's like, ooh, send that to the church, or like heat that up on the stove. Like, all of that is happening. The RIP shirts are happening. Men mostly playing dominoes, drinking out of the red Solo cups. All of this is happening in a space where mourning is also present. And I think In U.S. American society, we don't sit with suffering very well, our own or other people's. And one of the points that I wanted to make in that chapter is that repasts are probably one of the best examples of being with other people's suffering and our own, and we can learn a lot from it. At a repast, my experiences of repast, what I write about in repast, nobody is like checking to see if your plate looks like the food pyramid. People are trying to make sure you are well-fed, well-nourished by both the food, but also the stories that we tell about each other, the music, the entire vibe. And again, that feels like something we want to scale up. And it does happen. The other part I write about in the chapter, we go to Memphis, Tennessee, where a Black woman chef essentially organizes a citywide repast in the wake of Tyree Nichols' murder. 12 restaurants volunteered dishes to feed all the people who came to the city to celebrate his life. I don't know, again, I was very moved when I learned about Chef Tam and the work that she did. But that's that spirit of like being with people in their suffering, trying to alleviate a little piece of the suffering. Cannot bring your loved one back, but I can make sure that you have a great sweet potato pie, or that these collard greens can nourish you throughout the week, or whatever, whatever. And repasts are one of the few gatherings, actually, where nobody requires or expects you to write a thank you note. And I think it is important to note that because two things. One, I think something people intimately understand about repasts is it's your time today, it's my time tomorrow, or the next day, or whatever, that there's this kind of circle of life that's gonna bring that energy back to you. But also, I think there's something really important about this. No one expects you to necessarily have to thank someone, because we don't typically thank people for things that feel like this is what we should be doing with and for each other. Not that the thank you doesn't matter, I'm not saying that, right? But it's not a transaction as much as it feels like a responsibility, a shared responsibility.
And that feels like that really circles back around even to that food justice aspect. Like, how does this scale up? How can we make these interactions not transactional? How can we have that kind of care? How can we deal with folks grieving all kinds of things, including possibly the fall of whatever we are going through right now? That's a different topic.
Yes.
Can we get a couple of words, sentences, preview, whisper of what you're working on right now and what might be coming next? Get us ready.
Yes. In the most immediate term, I'm working on a nap. Sorry, y'all. My flight was at 5:30 this morning, and I'm still catching up. There are actually, my next sort of research-based book is about sugar in a place called, yes, thank you, place called Sugarland, Texas, which was the birth of the convict lease system in Texas. And so I'm writing, it's kind of changed a little bit, but I was sharing with Jessica earlier that the predominantly Black neighborhood in Sugarland is named Mayfair, called Mayfair, and it is literally the site where prisoners were held. That means they're in the same area. So I'm writing about like these plantation ripples that show up over and over time. What does repair look like? What is owed to whom? Sugarland is known because of its sugar production, but also because of Imperial Sugar Company that became this multi-billion-dollar company. So I'm writing about that. And then, I didn't say this earlier, but I am writing in my head, not on paper yet, but I've started mulling over this idea of a book called The Book of Grace. And it's mostly I've been collecting all these things about how people talk about the concept of grace publicly in pop culture and otherwise. And it seems to me that often grace is used as a way to excuse things. And then Black women are like, but no, I'm not asking to be excused. I'm asking to not be held up to perfection. So there's that. And I have this third piece that I'm trying to think about, which is grace as a form of accountability. So that's also what I'm working on. It has nothing to do with being an anthropologist, or maybe it has everything. I don't know.
Sounds related.
But I think in a fractured world, if we think about grace as the bridge between who we are and who we're trying to be, then I think we might want to get clearer about what grace is. Yeah.
It definitely sounds related, maybe not even to being an anthropologist, but to the work of bringing people together, of care, and of charting out different ways of imagining the next world. That Grace book. Yes. Very exciting. I hope folks, there's all kinds of things in the book that didn't even scratch the surface, what we talked about. So I hope folks ask all kinds of questions, which they have a chance to do now. Please line up or pop over to a mic. Yeah.
Yes, we're now at our Q&A. It is now time for our Q&A portion of the program. So you can come to this mic over here or across the aisle where my colleague is standing at. Can we get that started? We'll start right over there.
First, thank you. Appreciate you, especially coming when tired. I know that's not easy. I was reading the sample of the book. I got it digital. And one of the things I was sort of intrigued about was the playlist and how music seems to be at these gatherings as well. Talk to me more about the different types of music you heard over the time, over the, 8 out of the 40 invitations?
Thank you for this question. Disclaimer, the playlist is not kid friendly. So if you're going to listen to it, preview it first. But the playlist is available on Spotify for everyone to listen to. So it's a compilation of songs that I heard when I was at family reunions, at my actual cousin. There's some gospel songs on there, like that I heard at funerals and repasts. But there were also songs that were crowdsourced. I think I put out on socials, like, when you think of gatherings, what do they, when you think of Black gatherings, what do they sound like? What is the playlist? And there were some songs that were on there over and over and over again. And so those I added to the playlist. Psyche Williams-Forson has a book called Eating While Black. And she talks about Black food energy. And basically for her, Black food energy is the food, the music, it's the whole vibe. It's the whole vibe. And so I was trying to create a little bit of that. So there are line dance songs on there. There are like classics like the OJ's family reunions that opened up several of the family reunions that I went to, which was very cool. Like I said, there's some gospel music on there. But it's all like kind of moving through these cycles of emotion, joy. There's like, you know, I think there's a little Johnny Taylor on there. There's just all kinds of things around joy, sadness, kind of introspection, all come together on the playlist. Take a listen. Let me know what you think. What would you add? Yeah.
Hi. Thanks again for being here. I recently discovered your work, and I was really excited when I found you were coming here. I started reading the book, and one of the things you talk about is food as a language, especially in the context of repasts. And I've been exploring like West African food through various migration, and what I'm learning is that a lot of the food stays together through connection, shared memories, shared taste buds, and so on. And in a time that feels like radicalized self-care and boundaries and everyone kind of maybe keeping to themselves for whatever reason, how do we hold food or continue to use food as a communal language?
Oh, I love this question.
That's a good one.
Ooh, that was such a great question. I'm trying to decide how high I want my soapbox to be. We really zigged when we should have zagged when self-care became a thing. Because I do think there is a certain level of caring for myself that is my responsibility, but not at the expense of like community and communal care, which, I don't know, I feel like Jessica's gonna agree with me when I say this, has always been the thing that saved my life.
Absolutely.
Self-care has kept me afloat,
Mm.
but community care has literally saved my life in a number of ways. So I think there are some practical things. Not everyone is gonna have like a weekly Sunday meal or Sunday supper, but I love a good potluck. Sometimes I host themed potlucks where I ask people to bring something, a particular kind of dish. Now, of course, we know everybody cannot cook, and that's okay. We know this. But potlucks are so fun because it gives a lot of flexibility to people who cannot cook. It's okay, y'all. My family for a long time thought I couldn't cook and told me to bring the utensils and paper goods. I think we're over that now. But potlucks and kickbacks, I think, are a way. But I think what I want to say most is that everything that we think just happens doesn't. There has to be some level of intentionality behind it. So during the pandemic, I hosted these virtual things called Baking Black, where we would, my friend Savannah and I cook sometimes together on FaceTime because she lives in California. So, and she's vegan, so I feel like she helps me learn more vegan recipes. So then we did that with strangers, and that was really fun, a way of connecting. So cooking with people, but I think the intentionality behind it has to be there, like whether it's you set up a time and a date with folks to either gather or to cook together, I think is really, really important. I also, last thing I'm gonna say, I wanna put a plug in for cookbooks. Because, yes, cookbooks are amazing, incredible. Oftentimes, when I teach my food classes, sometimes students are really surprised by the amount of like cookbooks that represent the African diaspora, and there's so many. I think cookbooks are the literal answer when people say we're losing recipes. I'm like, are we? Because there are all these books that we can look toward, right? But you have to think about cookbooks, they exist, but then you have to like use them, right? So, you know, yeah. So I want to put a plug in for cookbooks. I want to put a plug in for just asking people, do you want to come over? Making it fun, making a theme. I love hosting people. I'm also a Capricorn. Jessica's Capricorn. So when I say people can't cook, my response to that is, I'll just cook everything. And so sometimes that's why I do the hosting, to be honest. So the last thing I'll say about the book, one thing that I say about Chef Tam is she was going to host the repast for Tyree Nichols on her own. She was going to do all this work by herself. But she shared this with other restaurant owners who took that as an invitation to say, but we do not want you to do this all by yourself. So I guess what I'm saying is sometimes people want to do these things, but they're waiting on someone else to initiate it. And you know, us goats sometimes get tired of initiating. And at the same time, initiating something gives other people permission to say yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Ashante.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi. So speaking of initiating things, I got to read your book, and something I noticed is in making all this gathering happen, whether reunion or repass or mutual aid, there's usually like a leader involved, usually a woman. And I guess I was thinking about what's your perspective on keeping all these great gatherings sustainable when there usually is like one, two, like a small group of people who are leading all these great events. So just more on what how you think can we sustain something like gatherings. when there's just only a few people who are really leading the charge.
Yeah. Stephanie is in a different writing group that I'm a part of. I'm gonna say an aside before I answer your question. We were in a 9-month creative writing group that has become its own gathering because the 9 months are over, but we didn't want it to be over. So we still are committed to meeting monthly, and Stephanie is our czar. So when she talks about the one person who is leading, that's our one person who is keeping us together. I saw the text. I'm going to respond later. So I think one thing about sustainability, Stephanie is right. There's a few people, it's often gendered, especially when it comes to repasts and family reunions. The best example that I saw in the family reunion context are the families that have actual, basically like, what do you call it? Like a board, like a family reunion committee that is sharing the responsibility. I think that was really cool. My own family has a family reunion committee, although I don't, anyway. We have a family reunion committee. One of the challenges has been, for many families, is getting young people involved in those committees. Sometimes the challenge is assumed to be that young people don't want to be involved, but sometimes there are actual people keeping young people from being involved. So I think that's a part of it. I think when it comes to family, friend groups in particular, one of the things that when I moved to Austin, I have a pretty solid friend group there. And I think we do a really good job of rotating who is kind of taking the lead on making sure we're gathering together. So it's not just one person who is doing it. I personally think it works better when you have these conversations about sustainability more directly instead of just kind of waiting for people to step up. Because sometimes what people assume is that, oh, she always does it, she must want to do it. And one of the things I have taken to heart is that if a community is going to fall apart because I am not the one doing it, it was never a community in the first place. And so I think the more we can have conversations about that, and the more that people who are doing all of the holding sometimes just need to allow things to fall apart to see if other people are willing to pick up the pieces, that is heartbreaking. I'm not gonna pretend like that isn't heartbreaking on some level, but I think it's also necessary. It truly is this kind of thing where when Maya Angelou says you basically teach people how to treat you, I think that comes to how we organize our spaces with each other too, right? Sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and if you're exhausted and you're tired and you never say it, or you want help but you never ask, sure, maybe people should ask, but they don't. But we can say, I need help, and then see what happens.
We now have time for one more question.
Thank you so much. So your talk today about like gathering spaces and the repass and family reunions made me think about like our proverbial cookout. And so I was thinking about it as not just like a joke, but like as it being like our sacred place. And so I just wanted your thoughts on how we protect like the sacredness and the intimacy of those spaces in a time where like Black culture is like being consumed, and then there's a lot of like anti-Blackness in it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted you to maybe share your thoughts around that.
Yeah, you know how people on social media say, everybody shouldn't be invited to the cookout? That's really true, actually. Everyone shouldn't be invited to cookout. So that's one thing I'm gonna say. But I also think the thing I think about cookouts that it is slightly different from other things is that it's amorphous in a way that's different from. Even though I was a stranger going to family reunions, I understood that a family reunion meant that these are people kin to each other. Cookouts, people are like, I'm going to this. I'm gonna call my homeboy from middle school. You come. I haven't seen you in 10 years, but it's okay. We're all going to this cookout. It's like an amorphous, oftentimes not super defined space. So in that way, we assume that everyone should be able to come to a cookout, right? not saying that that's a good or bad assumption. I'm just saying I think that's a function of the type of gathering. But in terms of protecting it, I think if you're hosting a cookout and you don't want it to be a space where someone brings their homeboy from 4th grade, then you say, this is an invite-only space. I think people do this all the time. There are all kinds of invite-only gatherings. When I see people having a cookout in the park, I don't assume that I can just go join their cookout. Maybe they would allow me to, right? But I don't make that assumption. So I think there's a way of deciding who you want to be in community with. And the last part about Black culture being consumed, choosing my words. I think there are a couple of different ways that we can approach the infinite creativity of Black culture. We can treat it as, this belongs to me. I don't want anyone else to have it. I want to gatekeep it. I think there are some legitimate reasons for that. I think we can also make some choices around, I understand how capitalism works. I understand how voyeurism works. And I cannot stop those things, but I don't have to let the presence of those things create enclosure for me. And the only reason I say that is because when I'm looking at discourses on social media, sometimes we can be so consumed about keeping people out that we don't realize we're boxing ourselves in. You want my recipes? Fine. It's the same way I think about research. Someone can do the exact same kind of thing that I do, and it's not going to look like I do it. It's not going to be the same thing. I'm flattered. Go do it. Go do the exact same study. That's how I feel about Black culture. The line between appreciation and appropriation is very thin. I actually don't want to spend my time policing that line, but that's just my personal opinion.
Please join me in thanking our moderator, Jessica Marie Johnson, and our author, Ashante Reese.
Thank you.
So this part of the